Hey, folks, we'll get started in just a second. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and get started. Senator Blumenthal can only be with here for a moment. I'm so pleased he's made some time to drop by. But I wanted to say good morning to everybody, and thank you all for being here. And I understand that weekday events often require you to take time away from work, and certainly the ongoing government shutdown has scrambled schedules for everyone, and I'm especially grateful that you all have been able to lend us your perspectives today. I want to just thank my staff members, Cassie and Suzanne, who many of you have been interacting with, for making this possible and working through all of the uncertainty. I'm so pleased that we're all actually able to convene today. I see some very familiar organizations here, and I'm grateful for your advocacy on this and many other veterans issues. Today's roundtable focuses on the unique challenges faced by veterans who have an encounter with the justice system, an already challenging and complex issue that has only been made more complex by the current political environment. So it is more critical than ever that we come together to highlight this population that so often goes overlooked or frankly written off, so that we can better protect them and their families during a time of crisis. So I'm thus very eager today to hear from experts who have been in the trenches working with these veterans and those who care for them. We all know that military service tends to leave marks on a person's life. Those marks may be positive, like discipline, self-confidence, and a sense of purpose, but we also know that these marks can also be very different and often negative, like trauma, addiction, depression, or lingering feeling that you live in a society where you don't quite belong. We have had countless hearings focused on the myriad challenges service members face as they transition to the civilian sector: housing insecurity and homelessness, lack of economic opportunity, undiagnosed injury and illness, and the list goes on. Yet rarely do we take time to acknowledge and address these intricacies when veterans find themselves in the justice system. That's what we hope to do here today, to learn about the specific actionable things we can do to improve our service to veterans who are at risk of getting into a system which has a very narrow means of escape. So I want to thank you all again for being here, and I look forward to walking out of here with a greater knowledge and perhaps a path forward so that we better serve all of our veterans and their families. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the other members of our committee who have joined us here. They're not quite here yet, so I'll acknowledge them when they come in. I now want to turn to the very, very distinguished senator from the state of Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal, ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and also you're a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which has particular relevance to the work that we're doing here. So, Senator, any remarks that you may have?
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Ranking Member, hopefully soon Chairman.
And you too, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Soon Chairman.
I really want to thank all of you for being here. The Congress is shut down, essentially. The House of Representatives is out of town. The Senate is at work. We have a meeting of the Judiciary Committee of the Senate, a markup, which will begin in about 5 minutes. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave early. But I really am here to say thank you to everyone. A number of you are representing the Yale Veterans Legal Services Clinic. Thank you to Rose Carmen Goldberg, who worked in my office in 2014, I believe, and is now the George Crawford, let me get this right, visiting clinical lecturer. Do I have it right? Okay, great. But to General McEwen and Chuck Hagel and Leon Panetta, who are working so hard on these issues, and really all of you, because veterans' legal needs are often forgotten and neglected. And I see it in Connecticut. We do not have a special court in Connecticut. We should have one. It's just one way that veterans can be accommodated, their needs addressed. I've been learning about immigrants who have served our country and are being rounded up. Obviously, there are a lot of abuses ongoing in the arrests that are being made of citizens, but these are immigrants who may not be citizens but have served our nation, and we need to provide for their legal rights. You know, we've seen again and again how veterans come back with invisible wounds of war, and they get into trouble in the military or when they leave the military. And the Yale Legal Service Clinic has been instrumental in representing some of the veterans who've suffered from PTS and got less than honorable discharges as a result, were deprived of health care they needed, and then became unemployed, became afflicted by diseases like substance abuse disorder. I have worked with Secretary Hagel, who recognized the need for those discharges to be upgraded in recognition of the causes of their disciplinary problems, which were those invisible wounds of war. So there are all kinds of ways that the public doesn't understand the legal needs of veterans, and Congress so far has failed to address many of them. But I view this kind of panel and event as a way of elevating those issues and making sure that we in the Congress, not just on the Veterans Affairs Committee, but throughout the Congress, recognize our obligation to care for our veterans. The Vietnam Veterans of America have been absolutely exemplary, along with the other veteran service organizations, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, Disabled Veterans of America. I want to credit those VSOs, but I would just close with what the Vietnam Veterans of America have as their mantra: never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. Many of you are veterans, and I want to thank you for your service. Thank the staff who are here today. We depend on them here in the Congress. And my apologies for having to leave early, but I want to vote in the Judiciary Committee over on the Senate side, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And Representative Takano is doing great work as the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. And I can't think, you've been such an amazing partner on these veterans issues and as the county part. And I dare say that it's the Senate that holds right now the destiny of our nation. Hold strong, stay firm, and thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And with that, I'd now like to turn to retired Brigadier General David McEwen from the Veterans Justice Commission to provide us with an overview of the topic that we're digging into more deeply during this session. So, Brigadier General David McEwen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Representative Takano, for inviting me to set the stage for this important discussion. I'm a 33-year veteran of the United States Army. I'm the husband, son, grandson, and father-in-law of military veterans, so veteran issues are kind of in my DNA. I'm here today representing the Council on Criminal Justice, where I serve as the director of the Veterans Justice Commission. The Council is a combination think tank and invitational membership organization, independent and nonpartisan. The Council's mission is to advance the understanding of the nation's military justice policy choices and build consensus for solutions rooted in facts, evidence, and fundamental principles of justice. In 2022, the Council of Criminal Justice assembled the Veterans Justice Commission to assess the risk factors that drive justice involvement in the veterans justice system. the adequacy of transitions assistance for military service members as they re-enter civilian life, and the effectiveness of the justice system's response when veterans break the law. Led by 2 former defense secretaries, the VJC includes 13 other leaders in science, the judiciary, the recovery field, healthcare, corrections, law enforcement, veterans affairs, and the military. Studies show that service-related trauma exposure combined with increased incidence of mental health and substance use disorders elevates veterans' risk of involvement with the criminal justice system. Veterans who have served in the military since September 11th may especially be at risk, in part because they've seen more combat deployments and redeployments than any other previous cohort of service members. The Commission issued 3 reports covering transition, the front end of the criminal justice system, and finally, the back end of the system. After extensive study and deliberation, these reports produced 11 findings and recommendations for evidence-based policy changes supported by detailed implementation steps that enhance safety, health, and justice. We believe we should improve definition and identification of veterans involved in the criminal system. There are no reliable estimates of how many veterans are incarcerated or have come in contact with justice system more generally, and database tools designed to help law enforcement, correction facilities, and courts verify veteran status are rarely used. Additionally, federal and state statutory frameworks and regulations use different definitions of veterans, which complicate the task of identifying them. The Commission partnered with NYU on research to assess whether states are consistently identifying veterans in the justice system. The report found that reliable estimates of currently incarcerated veterans or who have come in contact generally do not exist. Federal, states, and local criminal justice agencies and courts should improve processes for identifying veterans in the system and adopt a uniform definition of military veteran for use in those processes. The Commission recommends that Congress and states incentivize the use of these VA databases by states and local law enforcement officers, jail staffs, and court personnel by requiring the adoption and implementation of systems before funds and other resources can be assessed. We must create a continuum of alternatives to prosecution and incarceration for justice-involved veterans. Our study concludes that veterans who commit offenses as a result of service-related conditions represent a unique class of defendant in our criminal justice system because the conditions of their underlying criminality are partially created by the government that prosecutes them. Federal and state governments should adopt statutory frameworks that incentivize and improve veteran diversion, deferred adjudication, participation in treatment courts, sentence mitigation, and records clearance. The VJC recommends that states codify rehabilitation best practices for justice-involved veterans in statutes that cast a wider net and provide more alternatives to incarceration and prosecution. Such laws ensure that all veterans have access to rehabilitative interventions, sentencing mitigation, probation or parole considerations where appropriate. We should establish a national center on veterans justice to improve justice-involved veterans programs through research and coordination. A lack of coordination among programs for justice-involved veterans results in duplication of efforts, a lack of proper program evaluation, and an inability to disseminate best practices. As a result, justice-involved veterans seeking assistance often confront a confusing and disjointed network of untested interventions. The federal government should create a national center for veterans justice to lead a coordinated effort to improve outcome for veterans in the criminal justice system. We must make transition a core mission of the Department of Defense. The department should make successful transition a core priority mission and ensure the mission is conducted in coordination with the VA, Department of Labor, OPM, Small Business Administration, Department of Education, and state, local, and private veterans organizations, and veteran service organizations and non-governmental organizations. We need to integrate evidence-based practices into management of performance issues and specified military justice cases. The military's punitive approach to performance issues and certain military justice cases stands in stark contrast to the best practices in the civilian criminal justice field, where emphasis is placed on providing evidence-based rehabilitative services to individuals with the highest risk and need. DoD should integrate evidence-based practices into its management performance issues and specified military justice cases to promote retention, treatment, and healing of active duty and National Guard and Reserve service members. It's important to expand VA eligibility as directed in the GI Bill of 1944 and improve veterans' service during transition. The VA should adopt regulations that follow the plain text of the 1944 GI Bill by providing VA eligibility to all former service members not discharged under dishonorable discharge conditions. And Congress should mandate automated nationwide enrollment into VA health care for all eligible transitioning service members. We must identify and provide VA health care to incarcerated veterans. An administrative rule formalized in 1999 prohibited incarcerated veterans from receiving care from the VA, eliminating a long-standing benefit. As a result, incarcerated veterans are dependent on institutional care that may not fully address their unique service-related needs, particularly post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. We should prioritize the recruiting and hiring of justice-involved veterans. While the cause of second chance employment is attracting growing support in the business sector, there's no large-scale collaboration among industry and government, focusing on hiring people with criminal convictions who serve our nation military. The American business community, as well as government entities at all levels, should implement policies that directly promote the hiring of second chance veterans. It's time to eliminate administrative barriers to housing eligibilities and prevent arrearages. Conflicting legal definitions of homelessness and their application to veterans returning home after incarceration creates barriers that can substantially complicate veteran efforts to secure housing during reentry. Some reentering veterans also struggle with accumulating debt caused by the VA's erroneous payments of benefits during their confinement. The Department of Housing and Urban Development and other federal agencies should remove administrative barriers that restrict housing opportunities for formerly incarcerated veterans. Congress should pass legislation to prevent benefit arrearages for veterans who notify Social Security Administration of any felony incarceration lasting or expected to last more than 60 days. We should develop and evaluate best practices for veterans housing units. Veteran-specific housing units in prisons and jails have become increasingly popular, gaining support with corrections leaders for their perceived positive impact. Rigorous study of the units is needed to fully understand their effectiveness. Congress should fund and direct the Department of Justice through the proposed National Center for Veterans Justice to coordinate research on veterans housing units and develop best practices for their use. We should create second look review for the process at recognized military service. Second look policies have been adopted in 12 states and the District of Columbia, but incarcerated veterans have few opportunities to request resentencing based on facts related to their military service. Congress and the state should enact second look legislation that creates mitigation considerations for military service in resentencing, parole, and clemency processes. Studies show that deployment-related trauma, combined with increased incidence of mental health and substance use disorders, elevate veterans' risk of contact with the justice system. Once ensnared in the system, veterans often present a complex set of needs and risk factors that are distinctive from those characterized of civilians without a military background. These policy recommendations are designed to advance public safety by ensuring veterans get the therapeutic interventions they need. It's nothing short of tragic that some men and women who wore the cloth of our nation now wear the cloth of incarceration. People who serve this nation through service in our armed forces have sacrificed to protect it. It's time to better recognize that the sacrifice to take the steps to our veterans are not lost in prison and jails, but instead receive interventions that can help them resume their responsibilities to their families, their communities, and their countries. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brigadier General David McEwen. I'm pleased to welcome my colleagues, Ms. Delia Ramirez from the state of Illinois, Mr. Herb Conaway from the state of New Jersey. Ms. Ramirez, I understand you have a question that you want to ask right off the bat here. Make sure the light goes on. Is the light on? There it goes.
It's only been 3 years, and I still don't know. Well, good morning. Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Takano, thank you so much for convening today. I do have a question, because I'll have to unfortunately leave a little earlier, but I want to first start by thanking you for holding this round table today, and for our panelists and our advocates who are joining us. As a ranking member of Oversight and Investigations for this committee, I'm committed to defending all veterans, but especially our veterans who've been impacted by our justice system. And we know we're here to fight for the dignity and support that veterans have rightfully earned, especially as they encounter different challenges navigating systems, including the legal system. And so I want to talk to you about an area within the justice system that I don't think we often talk about or connect with veterans. And to me, it's really unimaginable that veterans who, I was hearing you speak and I had to write a note about this, but those veterans, people who have worn the cloth of this nation, who fought to defend this nation, are now victims of deportation. We don't talk about deported veterans enough. And yet we know that there's about 100,000 veterans right now here in the United States who don't have a United States citizenship and are at risk of deportation given the current system that we live in. And despite their service and sacrifice, too many undocumented veterans have faced deportation because of this immigration system. And so my questions today, because I think that my colleagues here will talk more about the justice system and the incarceration here in this country more closely, I want to talk to you about the questions that I'm hearing specifically as we're watching these mass deportation rates happening around the country. Mass deportation rates that are really focused on three key areas, as some have said: people's physical appearance, people's occupation, and location. We have veterans in Chicago, California, Idaho, Kentucky, all over this country, and many of them can fit those categories when being asked their status or being stopped at a traffic stop or being taken. So in my conversations with stakeholder groups and veterans, one of the prevailing issues that arise is what happens to deported veterans and how they access their benefits once they're no longer in the United States. I'm curious if one of you can answer this question for me. What systems does the VA have in place to ensure that deported veterans can access their health care, their disability benefits, and mental health care abroad? And the second question that I have for you is, what legislative action can we take to improve these systems or create a system so that deported veterans can continue to receive their benefits that they have earned?
Hi, Rose Carmen Goldberg. I'm visiting faculty at the Yale Law School Clinic. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak on this critically important topic, and thank you so much for that really important question. As you said, deported veterans are really invisible. They often say they feel neglected and forgotten, so I'm glad that here today we can give some voice to what they're going through. And I really appreciate your question regarding access to VA benefits, because that is underlooked. It's often said that deportation of veterans is a second punishment. First we incarcerate them, then we deport them, but there really, as you're alluding to, is a third punishment, which is once they're deported, they effectively lose access to all VA benefits. Under the law, they retain the right to these benefits. It's not contingent on citizenship status or location in the world, but it's nearly impossible to access these benefits. So to one of your points about access to healthcare, there is no access to healthcare for deported veterans. In rare circumstances, veterans may be able to obtain humanitarian parole to return to the United States for temporary care. and sometimes that functions well. There's a special humanitarian parole program specifically for deported veterans run by DHS, but unfortunately many of those requests are denied, and even in very dire circumstances, there have been veterans literally at death's door across the border. Their families will plead, please come back, just cross the border to San Diego for stabilization, and those requests are denied. No reason is given, and there's a large number of veterans who have literally died overseas from conditions that may have been treatable by the VA. The one small fix, which is very incomplete and inadequate, is there's a program called the Foreign Medical Program, FMP, through which the VA pays for healthcare abroad for veterans. Unfortunately, it's quite limited. So it's only available for service-connected conditions, and it's kind of a catch-22 situation where many veterans who are deported haven't yet been service-connected, so they may not have access to the foreign medical program whatsoever. Even if they do, there can be a whole host of conditions for which they could receive care at the VA in the US, but they cannot access. It's also hard to use the foreign medical program. Many foreign providers are not eager to participate. The VA can be slow to reimburse. It's my understanding they often still pay by check. So it's really grossly inadequate on that point.
Thank you.
Regarding solutions, I know there has been legislation introduced to, at minimum, provide more robust opportunities for temporary return to access VA healthcare. There also has been legislation to expand the foreign medical program. There have been several approaches. One is to broaden it beyond service-connected conditions for deported veterans rated permanent and total disability. Some proposals have been just to remove the service connection requirement entirely, and also to smooth over the problematic wrinkle of paying by check and this not actually really being a functioning system. In past years, the VA has done a little bit regarding helping deported veterans access their VA benefits. There have been a few visits across the border for claims assistance, but my understanding is not in a long time. And of course, there are deported veterans all over the world, not just in Mexico. I know my students have spoken with deported veterans from Kenya, Argentina, South Korea, Jamaica, you name it. So I really think it is a very big problem, and especially problematic because under the law, they retain the right to these benefits.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Romo?
I'll be very brief. Congress could really help out, and we would have a deported veteran issue if they pass a bill saying that within 2 years or whatever time frame, once people come in the military, they get automatic citizenship, immigrants. So when you do that, the Air Force had a good program, but the Trump administration got rid of it. As soon as they got done with basic training, people automatically became citizens that were immigrants. So if Congress could pass that law, we wouldn't have a deported veteran issue henceforth, okay?
So, go ahead, Mr. Romo, go ahead.
What?
I didn't mean to interrupt, go ahead.
And then finally, I'm gonna give my card because for time's sake, I like one of our people from LULAC, because we're on the forefront of the deported veteran issue, Dee James, to discuss with you. She runs our committee on deported veterans. She has a lot of information. And also, she has a nonprofit she does with deported veteran issue. And she can give you a lot of substantial information to forward to you. So one of your staff members, so I'm gonna give you my card so we can follow up with one of your staff. I'm gonna give you a quick example, real quick, like Jose Barco is a man without a country. He came 2 years old. His parents were immigrants from Cuba, but he was born in Venezuela, and he committed a crime, and he's been locked up since he went on parole for 10 months in ICE. They actually shipped him to Honduras on his way to Venezuela. Venezuela said, hey, your birth certificate in Venezuela looks fake, we ain't taking you. So he's a man without his country, and he just had his case for immigration judge in Denver, and it said you can either go to Mexico, Venezuela, or Cuba. He's still a man without a country. He's been here since two years old. He made a mistake. Now he's paying double price for it. So it's really sad. There's a lot of situations like that. I wouldn't take too much time, but I like to work with your staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, of course, Congresswoman Ramirez is a co-sponsor of the Veterans Service Recognition Act, which I just reintroduced a few weeks ago, which would address the issue of non-citizen veterans being supported while they're in the military and getting their citizenship. Many service members think that when they take the oath of allegiance to our country that that means they're a citizen. But of course, there's also a host of difficulties in terms of exercising their right to be citizens on an expedited basis because of military citizenship. The military does not necessarily support them in obtaining that citizenship. So I think the bill contains provisions to make sure that they're supported in getting their citizenship. Second, the other key part of the bill is to make sure that the service record of anyone in criminal proceedings or in deportation proceedings is weighed, that there is a way for their service history to be weighed into the process, so it's not, a fait accompli that they're just deported. It's not optimal, but as far as working through a bipartisan sort of path forward, this was a bill that's that has bipartisan support. Actually, we do have 2 or 3 Republicans on the bill. One question I have: does anybody know whether ICE still has this policy, or it had a policy of identifying veterans when they come into custody? That was supposed to be something they did. Congressman Juan Vargas and myself actually wrote a letter to, I think it was GAO, trying to ascertain the actual number of veterans that were under deportation or had been deported. But they wrote us back and said they couldn't figure it out because even though ICE had its own internal policy to ask the question, are you a veteran of the United States? They weren't following their own policy, and I don't know what the disposition of that is. I kind of tend to doubt that this particular administration is asking that question. Dominic?
Thank you, General. Recently, in Chapter 529 in Ohio, a veteran Marine from the Vietnam era, 2 Purple Hearts, served with honor, came home as a drug user and committed a crime and was incarcerated in Ohio for 44 and a half years. I rarely do this, but I attended his parole board hearing twice because he was such a model citizen and the president of the Chapter 539 and 529, and he was a model of what you can do while incarcerated for the community that you lived in, which was the Grafton Correctional Institution, and the greater community at large. So he figured out a way to serve from incarceration to the greater community and did work with the chapter of veterans, which were housed together at our insistence, because that helps veterans to become what they were, which is mission-oriented and purposeful. And when you house veterans together in an institution, there is zero discipline issues. There are no longer any issues that way. Nonetheless, Modesto Garcia was born in Spain and came here as an infant and enlisted in the Marines in 1967. And in 1973 committed a crime in Los Angeles, which was significant enough to incarcerate him for a long, long time. As a model prisoner and as a model person, he was released recently, 6 months ago. But he never, ever, and I knew him well, he never, ever became a citizen. He didn't know he was not a citizen. His release from the Grafton Correctional Facility was overcome by ICE representatives waiting for him, and they incarcerated him, and he remains in an ICE facility now. And it's the double jeopardy is significant. And the tragedy of this is significant as well, because the model of wrongdoing occurred because of post-traumatic stress. and because of traumatic brain injury. Both are significant conditions which caused the beginning of his crime spree as a drug user and a drug seller in the early 70s when he returned. My answer to your question is it's a history of one which is a remarkable condition for many. And this can be overturned in a second. I think that every veteran who serves is a citizen and should be a citizen immediately. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I remember in 1968, from New York State alone, they were drafting 19,000, and there were many, many immigrants in New York who were drafted, who were offered citizenship if they joined rather than became drafted. And there was a program already in place during those years. I'm not sure what happened to it, but it's no longer in place. And a program like that should be revisited, and this should be an immediacy. This shouldn't be a bill that takes 2 or 3 years to correct. This should be the stroke of a pen. Any veteran who served, who is also an immigrant, is a citizen. End of that story. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Yezzo. Jennifer, before I recognize Jennifer, I just want to acknowledge the participation of Dr. Kelly Morrison from the state of Minnesota. But Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. I just wanted to add some context. My name is Jennifer Ross. I'm the Manager of Federal Policy at the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. You asked the question about whether or not ICE was actually validating veteran status. I think this is actually also an issue within the Veteran Treatment Court process in general. While 48 states currently have veteran treatment courts, only 34 of those states actually are operated under statutory backing, which means 14 are operated at the local level, meaning that whether or not they ask the question, are you a veteran, is not required. Or if it is asked, the veteran may not be verified or even confirmed as a veteran. You know, maybe they didn't want to admit that they were a veteran, you know, when being arrested at that time. So without any kind of legal language requiring ICE or treatment courts or, you know, police or officers, federal officers to ask those questions, there are many veterans, whether it's incarceration or whether it's in ICE detention, that are just not being asked that valid question.
Jennifer, I recall that our question to ICE was, our question to the GAO was, GAO replied that ICE had an internal policy, but you raised a question about the statutory requirement that ICE do this. Whether or not ICE would do it in the future is another big question. But General McEwen raised also the point about the databases and the inconsistent definition of what a veteran is. So whether we're dealing with potentially deportable veterans or just anybody, citizens that are involved in the justice system, this initial reluctance among many veterans to acknowledge that they're actually veterans because of the shame they may feel. But it seems to me that, Mr. McEwen, your organization, General McEwen, your organization has identified solutions to these databases and the inconsistent definitions so that there may be another way for us to routinely identify who has been a member of the armed services. Is that right?
And yes, sir. Part of the problem with self-identification is especially the shame that is accompanied with justice involvement. Some of our studies have proved that someone who has served often feels shame that they've let themselves and their unit down, their former unit down, because they have pride in their service. And so they don't want to associate themselves with their old life because they're now involved in the justice system. or they're fearful of losing benefits. Is the other thing. If I claim my benefit, if I claim my service, I'm going to lose a benefit. So that's. And the third thing that happens is there are jurisdictions that use their service as a matter of aggravation rather than mitigation. By that I mean, you're a trained killer, you've been trained to do this, so I'm going to use it against you, rather than I took you, as the government took you from a civilian, trained you, and so has an obligation to make you whole because you've been changed. So those three things contribute to the fact that veterans often don't claim their veteran status, as well as the fourth, which is not everyone, if somebody hasn't gone to combat, oftentimes they don't think they're a veteran. Or there's lots of reasons. And then we have all these different statuses of what is a veteran, depending on you're a veteran for this benefit, but you're not a veteran for that benefit. You're a veteran in this state for this benefit, but not for that benefit. So there's confusion about what a veteran is. So that's why oftentimes we say, have you served? Have you raised your right hand and taken the oath? That's the easiest definition of veteran, and that's the one we've recommended to be adopted.
Well, thank you. It seems like we have some work to do on getting jurisdictions all over the country to figure out a way to suss out veteran status. Colonel Sines.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. I think everyone has made some excellent points. Again, Jim Sines, I'm the president of the Hispanic Veterans Leadership Alliance. And to your question, the general's made some great points about why someone might not identify themselves as a veteran. But regretfully, in this day and age, we have anecdotal evidence that ICE is not even following their own internal policies of asking. There was a famous story coming out of California where a vet was caught up in an ICE raid. He showed his veteran ID, and they just chose not to say it was a lie and not follow it. We have indications that there's currently an active duty service member in Texas who was swept up in an ICE raid on 3 September and has not been allowed to talk to his family since then. And this is not even a veteran. This is someone who's actually on active duty. So regretfully, the solutions that have been pointed out are long-term solutions that are going to be needed regardless of where we are. But in this day and age right now, we have an out-of-control federal law enforcement agency who is violating the civil rights, the human rights, and due process of vets.
It seems the insistence on this particular point, respecting and identifying veterans or respecting, something along these lines, I'm thinking it is immediately actionable by members of Congress on oversight. So we should think about something along those lines.
A lady from Blue Light working with that family on active duty soldiers, so maybe Congressman Ramirez, we give that information later.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Conaway?
Of course, it is, we can pass all the laws we want to pass. If the administration is going to behave in lawless ways, those laws are for naught. I do wonder whether or not it would be, and even as I propose, that perhaps there should be a requirement. You know, they take people in, they get identification. You know, how difficult would it be to run a database to see whether or not that's a veteran? Then you don't have to get to the question of self-identification or implicating any of these other issues that might prevent someone from identifying themselves as a veteran. But again, you'd have to follow the law. And clearly, in so many instances, protection of civil rights, just basic decency, are just not being followed by the administration and that force. But we have to try, nonetheless.
So there's the issue of ICE, but I think also this issue of law enforcement jurisdictions all across the country, whether they're municipal, whether they're county, that there needs to be a uniform way, a procedure to do exactly what you said. General McEwen mentioned in his opening remarks regarding the difficulty with databases. You might just want to review that a little bit since some of the folks came in later.
Yes, sir. There is the VA has a database, two databases that they have currently. They're called Squares and VRSS. One is, and these two databases require permissions for, and that's the bureaucracy of the database system. They require individual jails or departments to have database permissions because of privacy. So they have to have permissions to request data. And so that's the problem. If an individual, and so there's a low utilization rate. So if someone says, I want to be able to access data to find out whether someone's a veteran, they have to go to the Department of Veterans Affairs, get permissions to be on that database and request it. It could happen, but we have to incentivize it, and then 18,000 jurisdictions would have to have permissions to have access to that data, and not everyone does that right now, and that's the issue.
And that permission, that's a form that the veteran would...
Not the veteran, that's a form, it's a system that the jurisdiction, your county, your parish, your city would have to have someone that manages it with the VA and goes and says, I want to belong to the VRSS or Squares database.
So the low utilization rate speaks to the fact that it's not a normal procedure when they're intaking a person into incarceration. They're not routinely just checking the database. I mean,
That's correct.
right. So I have a number of people in the queue here to be recognized. Mr. Zenner.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Jim Zenner with LA County Department of Military Veteran Affairs. I'm the County Veteran Service Officer for Los Angeles. A couple points that I just wanted to make. As far as the aggravation that General McEwen brought up, I know we're talking primarily about criminal court, but in LA County, we get significant feedback from our veteran community that it's really used against them very harshly in family court for issues of custody and things like that. And so I just wanted to flag that for this group. Also, the question, are you a veteran? What we've kind of looked at in LA specifically is, does that question capture everybody? And what we found is there's a lot of women veterans that don't identify as veterans. And so we really adopted the question, have you ever served in the U.S. military, to make sure that we're capturing our women veterans, as well as our Reserve and National Guard, because we screen to see if they've ever been on Title X orders, to see if they're eligible for some VA benefits and things like that. So wanted to make those 2 points. And then I think what else would be useful is discussing a law that was passed in California in 2015, which led to Penal Code 858, which basically ordered the California courts to offer a MIL 100 form. It's a 2-page form that basically has general information about one's military service. And that form was to be sent to the State Department of Veteran Affairs as well as the County Veteran Service Officer, which is my office. Why that's really important is our study currently in LA County jails, 47% of our veterans that are incarcerated are not VHA eligible. And the unique opportunity that we have when we send veterans to our County Veteran Service Officer, we have 29 states that have County Veteran Service Officers. The other states have State Department of Veteran Affairs. When you send them there, we're proficient in getting those veterans into county services. Also, we do discharge upgrades for the simpler cases, more straightforward. And for the more difficult, complex, we refer them to our legal service clinics to get help getting discharge upgrades. So I think just want to point out that opportunity to look at leveraging state and county veteran service officers and to really kind of be part of the solution here. And we want to take it beyond just arraignment. We want to take it to where we automate the process for law enforcement. We're currently working on that with our county criminal justice collaboration. And so we really want to educate our local law enforcement. We have 46 police departments as part of our county. So going through our association at our county level to give them the Mill 100 form. We're looking at a QR code on a business card, but that referral would go to the state and to the county VSO so we can action up. And one other unique thing about the County of Los Angeles, we have a large peer support program. So when we get veterans through that, those peers who have lived experience would walk them through the social service office, get them connected to the VA. Sometimes veterans need to be walked into the VA. In Greater Los Angeles VA, we have a 388-acre campus. It's very confusing how to navigate. So we're really looking forward to doing that work moving forward and appreciate the ongoing leadership, Ranking Member.
Well, thank you for this information, Mrs. Zenner. It strikes me that the county and the state veteran service officers through the county and the states, that's a really good network, a good basis to try to get, the identification at arraignment, all of this stuff normalized or systematized. But I'm hoping that you might have some ideas about how we can, tap into the power of this network. Dana Montalto.
Thank you. Dana Montalto from the Veterans Legal Clinic at the Legal Services Center of Harvard Law School. I want to pick up on some threads that General McEwen brought up about the difficulty that these patchworks of different laws have created, and give credit to VA for some of the strides it's made with its Veterans Justice Outreach Program in providing some greater services and supports for justice-involved veterans. But that, just as Rose had talked about, that when veterans are pushed across the border, they lack access to the services and supports that they need. Similarly, when veterans are pushed into an carceral setting, how essentially they're deprived of the rights they continue to have to health care and benefits. They don't get the same access to health care when they are incarcerated. And we really have to think about veterans who are in the carceral setting and preparing them to eventually leave, as most of them will. And one of the problems we've been working with a lot with a local group of veterans that's incarcerated in Massachusetts is how difficult it is to engage with the VA claims process, and seeing veterans again and again not be able to file a claim or to really get their CMP exams while they're incarcerated. And that causes problems where their claims are being denied when, if they were outside, they would be able to be approved. But there's this chasm between VA and the state departments of corrections in sort of coordinating that access to care and to benefits. And if we were able to take advantage of their time in prison to help them get access to benefits, it might really smooth the reentry process for them, right? We know that there's a significant decrease in recidivism and justice involvement for people who are able to access their veterans' benefits and veterans' health care. And this is an area where VA, if it took some leadership, could really, without any need for laws, but just some amount of leadership and pressure, make the process of transitioning veterans back into civilian society much smoother.
Well, thank you for that. Dominic Yazzo.
Yes, just briefly to the point of veterans identifying, either at the point of arrest or at indictment, even if they have an opportunity to, they may choose not to, because one of the hardships of incarceration is that a disabled veteran's pension is reduced to 10% regardless of the size of the pension. And so many veterans choose not to. And if in the process they speak to other veterans who are incarcerated, they say, don't identify yourself because they're going to take those benefits away from you and your family. There's a bill that we've helped Senator Fetterman and King introduce to have that reinstated. It would help certainly veterans' families. It would be, we'd have to set up a fund, like an escrow fund for veterans, so that they'd have a fresh start and enough to support themselves when they were left out of the institution with $82 in a bus ticket to nowhere. So.
Dominic, does that 10% is it reduced to 10% while they're incarcerated?
Across the board, yes.
But does it resume after they
Yes,
leave?
but it also requires an application, and many veterans are unaware of that, unaware that they're able to get that or how to apply.
All right. Mo Sidor. Cedar or Sidor?
Cedar.
Cedar.
Yeah, thanks so much. Mo Cedar with Swords to Plowshares. We're a VA-accredited veteran service organization based in the San Francisco Bay Area. To piggyback off Dana and Dominic's points, there is a dearth of claims assistance for folks who are incarcerated. I think when we talk about justice-involved veterans, there's a lot of attention paid to, transitioning out of prison and reentry into society and prevention. But there are a lot of veterans who are going to spend the rest of their lives, decades, incarcerated. And what does that experience look like for them? And I think there's a misconception that a lot of them are being taken care of in prison. Their needs, their basic needs are being met. Maybe they don't need, their disability compensation, but that's not true. The 10% that many of them are allowed to receive can help pay for their basic needs, hygiene needs, extra clothes, basic food. I've heard of a veteran who had Parkinson's and due to his tremors was unable to use the powdered toothpaste that they gave him in prison and needed that funding in order to buy regular toothpaste just to be able to brush his teeth. Another elderly veteran who had a dietary restriction that he could only eat soft food. The prison wasn't providing him a protein. He needed money in the commissary to buy canned fish in order to, again, just basically survive. And there is not a lot of assistance. The VBA does not have, a cohort of claims agents or VSOs who are allowed access to these prisons to be able to help these folks establish their service-connected disabilities, to help navigate, getting those CMP exams done in prison, fill out that claims paperwork, get them updated claims forms so that they can navigate these processes. And many of them who are service-connected, they tell the VA, hey, I'm incarcerated. Please reduce my benefits to this 10% amount so I'm not, stuck with an overpayment. And despite notifying the VA that they are incarcerated, it takes the VA years to put 2 and 2 together and decrease their amount. And what results is these veterans have, 5-6-figure VA debts when they get out of prison, and that's being repaid by their service connection. So they're, finally out, they're trying to reenter, they're not considered homeless according to HUD definitions, so their housing options are limited, and they don't get any more service-connected disability benefits because the VA is trying to pay a $100,000 overpayment. And so it's, and for those who do have service-connected disabilities who don't deal with all of this, one of the things we regularly help veterans with in that situation is try to get their benefits turned back on once they are out. And that can take months, if not over a year to do, and it takes an attorney to handle it. The system should not work like that. And I think, we pay a lot of attention to homeless veterans, rightfully so, but not a lot to the folks who are behind prison walls and who are currently incarcerated. And there is so much overlap and similarity to these two populations. And the reality is these incarcerated vets very likely will be homeless veterans. And we should not wait until then to start paying attention to their needs and trying to fix these systems.
So, Ms. Cedar, right now under HUD-VASH, veterans who are transitioning out of incarceration have to go experience literal homelessness to be eligible for HUD-VASH. I do have a bill that I've introduced with, it's called the End Veteran Homelessness Act, that I introduced with Maxine Waters, which would fix this issue. Can you comment on what impact that would have on veterans who are exiting incarceration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would allow them to hopefully start to be able, while they're still incarcerated, to work on establishing their housing, because there's so many housing benefits that are available to folks who meet that definition of homelessness. And if they, again, had advocates and agents in the prisons who could help them set that up in advance, knowing they would qualify for that when they got out, because again, they would meet this definition, then they could have somewhere to land when they were released.
Well, thank you. Rose Carmen Goldberg.
Thank you. So I want to add and amplify what everyone has been saying. So regarding access to compensation and pension exams, while veterans are incarcerated, one thing that is puzzling to me is the fact that this isn't a huge success story. It often is quite hard for veterans, such as unhoused veterans, to access their compensation and pension exams. I know from having been Mo's colleague at Swords to Plowshares, represented a number of unhoused veterans. They don't have stable addresses, they may not receive the notices, so it can be quite challenging. Incarcerated veterans are, by definition, not going anywhere. They're at an address. The government has that address. So in my mind, compensation and pension exams and access to benefits should be a big victory for the VA in terms of serving incarcerated veterans. It really should be a lot easier to administer, but it's, in fact, the opposite is the case. It can take, half a year or longer to facilitate an incarcerated veteran receiving a compensation and pension exam. And as Dana alluded to, VGOs are very helpful often in facilitating that, but there's no streamlined process. It often takes an advocate, and there's a lot of coordination between the attorney, the veteran, the facility, the VA, and again, that can take about half a year. So I would hope that that's something that the VA could flip and turn into a success story. I also want to add on access to healthcare for incarcerated veterans. As others have alluded to, incarcerated veterans under the law retain full right to VA healthcare. One issue there is the VA has interpreted the law to say that so long as the facility has a duty to provide health care, the VA doesn't have to provide any. So as long as the facility is fulfilling the needs, the VA doesn't have to do anything. The problem there is a conspicuous gap. So of course the VA provides very specialized health care. I can say with certainty that there's little to no MST specific services within facilities. So I really hope that we can push back on the VA to help them recognize that, even though facilities might be providing some level of healthcare, it's not the specialized VA healthcare that has been shown to be life-saving. There is data out there to show that VA healthcare really is a lot better for veterans. That specialization makes a big difference. And on that point, something that I would hope the VA could work towards is making regular telemental health care accessible to veterans, and to others' points about, of course, thinking about, caring for and treating the veteran while they're incarcerated, also thinking ahead to their transition and, thinking about rehabilitation and preventing recidivism. If someone can get set up with that specialized needed VA mental health care while they're incarcerated, it would stand to reason that they're gonna have a much easier process. They're already in the VA system. They can stick with that therapist and have that access during what can be the very rough period of getting out.
Well, thank you. I'm just amazed at the granular knowledge that all of you have and how you ended up in your particular issue niches. I'm very grateful that we have such brain power behind all of this. And I'm thinking to myself about my colleagues, but any thought that our job was done is completely obliterated. I mean, we have so much work to do. Renee Burbank.
Yes, thank you. I'm Renee Burbank. I'm the Director of Litigation at the National Veterans Legal Services Program. I want to highlight and reiterate several of the points already made and really bring together some of these issues relating to the myriad systems and reporting and poor reporting among the many different jurisdictions and how that affects VA benefits when incarcerated. So as an example, the reduction in compensation exists for folks who are incarcerated for a felony for 60 days or more. Now, not everyone gets the same sentence that they might be potentially getting when they are arrested. So in some places, the court will report to the VA, we have a veteran, these are the charges against the veteran, and there's a felony in there. But they may not actually end up being incarcerated for that felony. So as an example, we work with state and local VSOs all around the country, and I have a story from one of our partners in Nevada, where a veteran was incarcerated on charges of a felony, pled to a misdemeanor, but the VA had been told there's a felony. They did not reduce his benefits immediately because, as has already been noted, it takes a long time for a VA to process this. 2 years after the veteran had left incarceration, they did not contact the court, they did not contact the prison, they contacted his former address at his mother's house and said, "We think you're still incarcerated. We're going to start calculating an arrears, an overpayment for multiple years of incarceration." This person was never incarcerated for a felony, should not have gotten a reduction, was no longer incarcerated, and yet the VA then turned off his benefits, and that's when he first found out that the VA was doing this. He was no longer receiving his VA benefits, and realized, wait, I don't have the money I thought I was going to get this month, what's going on? And was able to get it fixed with the help of a VSO. But this was because the VA was communicating with part of the system, but not other parts of the system, trying to work with a veteran when, if they're incarcerated, we should know where they are. It should be easy to find and really fix those problems. So there's a lot of delays in the system that cause additional problems. There are a lot of miscommunications and only partial communications of the issues because we have so many systems, local systems, state systems, federal systems, and that ends up hurting the veteran the most because they're responsible for tracking in all of these systems what's going on when they have, obviously, other parts of their life that they're dealing with.
Thank you, Renee. Raleigh Smith, Duttweiler.
Thank you so much for having us here. I am from the National Military Family Association, and in all of this process, it sounds really confusing for the veteran, and the veteran is often not going through this process alone. We are there as the family trying desperately to figure out what to do, how to help, and most importantly, how to not make it worse. The family in Texas, we have been working closely with the family and trying to make sure that they have the help and support they need as they navigate this really difficult time. It's our understanding that yesterday he was moved to a correctional facility in Texas. So from Border Patrol to ICE to a correctional facility, and the family doesn't know what to do. And they called a friend. The friend was another military spouse, another military community member, and that is what we do again and again and again because we don't know who else to call. The veteran doesn't seem to have a clear place to go, and neither do we. Jim, I first met you when we came out to LA County for an NMFA event, and I sat in your office while I was waiting to meet with you, and the person who checked me in was super nice, showed me around the office, and I asked him, what do you do for the families who are dealing with the court system? Because it's a question I know I have to ask everywhere I go because there's no consistent answer, but we have consistent questions from families. If NMFA doesn't know, I don't know what to tell anybody. And so we try to collect those answers, but they are so inconsistent that when my own family went into the justice system, I didn't know what to do. My husband was arrested for a DUI, and it was the third time he had flipped his Jeep in 2 years. And my husband is not whatever archetype of a bad person that I thought would be on the other side of a criminal justice problem. I had a really good guy who was really hurt from war and who had a 90% rating from the VA for PTSD with alcohol abuse disorder and no intervention to make sure he got the help he needed. I felt so alone in this process while I worked for NMFA, while Eileen tried to help me figure out who to call, while I called our friends at Blue Star Families and anybody I could think of, but nobody had any good advice. And we were here in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I live, in a VA system that my grandfather worked for 20 years. I mean, I should have been the most connected person you can think of, and I didn't know what to do at all. And we sat there working through, is it better for us to pay $35,000 to get a fancy schmancy criminal attorney that we couldn't afford, between service member salary and nonprofit, there's no money for extra legal stuff there. But do we do that, or do we have you go through this process, lose VA benefits, he's a reservist, potentially lose your place there, potentially lose your job in the civilian sector? I have a type 1 kid who needs TRICARE. And that's the math that all of our families are doing, and we have no way to guide them. This summer alone, NMFA does a lot. We do advocacy, we do research, we also do programs for families around the country. One of the things we do is operate this amazing camp program for military kids, Operation Purple Camp. We put about 1,200 kids through sleepaway camp for a week every summer. It's awesome. They build community. Community's great, right? Like, we all know we need that sense of belonging. Usually, in the course of a summer, we'll have maybe 1 or 2 mandatory report incidents with our kids. Something bad happens at home, and that's normal. That's normal for the camps. You're gonna see that anywhere in a week of camp. By the end of our first week of camp this summer, we had 3. By the end of the second week, we had 5. I would love to tell you that that's anecdotal and that I am not concerned about it. I really am. Every single one of these cases were kids where the parent applying for camp had indicated they knew there was something going wrong. There was an invisible injury that they knew about in the house. They were trying to figure out how to get it taken care of. They didn't know. I was once that parent who knew something was wrong but didn't know how to get the help. And we had kid after kid after kid. By the end of the summer, we were sitting here having like a come to Jesus conversation as camp programmers, trying to figure out how to help these kids when we didn't want to have to make the mandatory report calls because we knew it would only make it worse. We'd send them into a system without the cultural competency to say, it's not that you've done something wrong, it's that there is something wrong in your house and we want to help you. And it is the missing piece of all of this. Before they get to you, I have a family. I want to help them when we still can before it gets harder, and I don't even know where to begin.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a lot of people in the queue. I just want to throw out a question. I realize that some of you that you've all raised your cards because you have to respond to something in the medium, and the prior. But this is what's been kind of, we've seen in the news some reports of some of the mass shootings involving veterans. You know, I don't want to overstate the connection with veteran and military service and the mass shootings. I mean, we've got people who are non-veterans who are involved in these shootings. But I'm haunted by a shooting in particular that happened several years ago in my colleague Ms. Brownlee's district at a bar in like Ventura. The veteran lived with his mother. There was a cache of weapons in the mother's home. I just have to think that, I don't know whether the mother was completely clueless or not, or whether she was living with something that she couldn't connect with anybody else with. But this brings me to another thing about justice-involved veterans and the etiology of all of these comorbidities among our veterans. How we can also incorporate the kind of prevention and services, and I think a lot of it kind of arises in the family before we know. But I just want to sort of raise that as a topic, because beyond the actual folks that are actually incarcerated, the problems they have with their benefits incarceration, how might we also look at the fact that they've been trained as killers, have the government take responsibility that we've trained everyone to be these killers, and that we have a lot of responsibility in terms of where things go awry after they separate from the military, that the responsibility still is on Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense, that we have the resources and we have an obligation to continue to be involved in these people's lives in a positive way. So I want to recognize Dana Montalto.
Thank you. I think my comment will be somewhat responsive to your question and picks up on an earlier point from sort of the framing from the Veterans Justice Commission, which is that we have to really think a lot about the transition out of the military and what that process looks like, right? There's a boot camp for getting in, but there's not a boot camp for becoming a civilian again. And how do we really focus on that process and provide supports as soon as possible when someone gets out. And I want to particularly highlight how this transition process is short-circuited for veterans who have problems that sort of arise while they're still in the military, where they may have experienced trauma, they may have gotten out with a less than honorable discharge, and not only are they given an even less of a transition process than the imperfect one we have for service members currently, but then there aren't the same supports for them when they get out. And VA has made some progress in the past year in sort of removing some of the exclusionary rules to help get access to veterans to some care and benefits, but they still have a lot of barriers for veterans. And I think a lot about one of the veterans I worked with who was a Marine sexual assault survivor in the military and started just drinking heavily and got out and had a number of DUIs because he didn't have any mental health care. He didn't have any benefits when he got out because of the other than honorable. And it was only more than a decade that he finally connected with us. We were able to get him health care, we were able to get him benefits, and he hasn't had any incidents since then. But we could have saved him that time. We could have given his life back to him much earlier had he not been told when he first went to VA and he got out that he wasn't eligible, that he didn't even count as a veteran. And so there's, I think, a lot that VA, again, within its current regulatory powers, but I think with more oversight from Congress, could do to ensure that veterans who have trauma experiences, where they start manifesting the sort of justice involvement happens while they're in the military, get taken care of, because it's just kind of a matter of timing. For veterans who are justice involved, does it happen before their discharge or after their discharge? We treat them very differently, and I think we really need to think of them more as the same.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Dominic Yezzo.
Yes, just once again, briefly. One of the things that occurs when a veteran who has a service-connected disability is incarcerated is that the funds that were due to this person are accumulated somewhere. And when a veteran is rated at the Veterans Administration for a specific disability that's service-connected, the VA sets a reserve, the same way insurance companies do, to meet their exposure financially. So when a veteran is incarcerated who has a service-connected disability, whatever the rating is, that those funds, that money, is no longer presented to the veteran, but it remains in some reserve for what? It's a question, it's a rhetoric about how to reapply what's already due, or how to save that or get hold of it again for something that would be more gracefully put to veterans.
Thank you. Thank you. You're suggesting a way of putting funds in a trust for the veteran while they're incarcerated?
Yes, good. So finding out what happens to the money once it's no longer paid, right? Because it's in a reserve, and that reserve is real, it's significant. Our stat in the Vietnam Veterans of America is that we have approximately 82,000 veterans who are incarcerated in the United States of America.
82,000?
82,000, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Mr. Zenner, Jim.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I have a couple of solutions I'd like to throw out for the group, and I also want to state that I serve as the National Policy Director for National Association of County VSOs, and we absolutely would want to work with yourself and your staff to create some of these solutions with local government. First of all, to your last question, we need to know who's coming back to our communities from the federal government. When I got out of the military, I didn't transition into a VA hospital, I transitioned into a community that didn't have representation at Fort Lewis when I was out processing through the TAP program. So that's one solution, is to get the federal government to work with states and counties to let us know who's coming back. Because if I knew who was coming back to the county, as the CVSO and Director of Military Veteran Affairs, I would get private sector employers, county departments to be there and fight over those men and women getting out of the military and their spouses for employment. We would have our educational institutes there to support those that are going into education. And then we'd have our partners at the state EDD office for any unemployment. So we would surround them with what they need and create competition, healthy competition for employment.
I'm sorry, is this a problem for the incarcerated veteran or all veterans, this last point you're making?
So this would be an upstream solution to make sure that veterans don't get into the justice system. Correct. Secondly, a solution to, and I hope I don't make this too personal for you, Raleigh, but apportionments. So there's a process when a veteran does go down to 10% after a 60th day of incarceration. There's a process that you can do, that we do as VSOs, called an apportionment. So that money can be redirected to their family members. The problem is county veteran service officers and State Department of Veteran Affairs do not get funded through the federal government, so there's limitations. We get most of our funding through property tax, local government, and some of our states are able to provide some funding from the general fund to support our work. So there just isn't enough of us to go around and get into the jail, educate veterans that are currently incarcerated about apportionment. So that's, really, if we want to look at a meaningful solution, look at automating the apportionment process. So when the VA goes in or gets a report from SSA or DOJ that somebody's been incarcerated over 60 days, going into the system and looking to see if they have any dependents on file and looking to automate that process so the family members aren't burdened for what the veteran's going through financially. And then also, we talked a little bit about release. We need to automate the process when veterans are released from jail or prison incarceration. We've had all sorts of stories in LA County of it taking months to get benefits reinstated, and that is a huge problem because, that's 2-3 months that a veteran's going without any kind of financial means, and that just leads to greater recidivism, and then, really an overburden on local government, which is already being burdened, and actually the burden is increasing on local government these days. So wanted to point that out. And then, really another piece is, we haven't talked about suicide. Our suicide rates of our justice involved veterans are really, really high, and that's why we're really looking to get out in front of it and automate the MIL 100 with law enforcement. So we're not waiting until arraignment, which is 3-4 months later. At the point of arrest or temporary detention, we're getting that information so we can start working with them and their families so they know that life isn't coming to an end. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And then lastly, moral injury. Haven't really heard a lot about moral injury today. My work through running a grant per diem program specifically for my fellow GWAT veterans out of Hollywood, California, there was a lot of moral injury that, until recently, we didn't know how to diagnose. We didn't know how to treat. And we're just starting to go down that road. And that led to a lot of my fellow veterans feeling misunderstood. Like, I remember one veteran slipped a piece of paper under my door that said, that was a story about moral injury. And when we sat down to talk about it, he said, Jim, it isn't a fear response. All my VA clinicians are saying, this time where you were at fear for your life, I don't feel no fear. It's really what I witnessed my fellow Marines do in Afghanistan. And so, what we're seeing in the justice population, I think, is a lot of moral injury, and I think we really need to screen for moral injury as we're doing justice-involved work moving forward. And I said lastly, but this is really lastly. In a 6-month study that we just got done doing in LA County, MST was very prevalent, and they mentioned a lot of the veterans that were going through the system mentioned that they were the scapegoat, and that's why they're not eligible for VA health care. And so that is probably one of the most prominent diagnoses that we saw in our 6-month study at LA County.
Oh, this is so sad. All right, General McEwen.
Sir, you asked about, or you referred to the question about how do you take care of all this trauma that you go through and the family, and then I think Dana talked about the boot camp out that we referred to, and our reports talk about DOD being responsible for transition, and not, right now, no one's in charge of transition. And our report highlighted that. You have VA, DOD, DOL, and when everyone's in charge,
No one's in charge.
no one's in charge. And so we clearly say DOD should be in charge, and we do it for exactly the reason that Dana alluded to. DOD has all the information, and what they're not doing is as important as what they ought to do. What they're not doing is identifying with an evidence-based risk assessment at the end, where they take a look at, because we know that most people leave the military better, stronger, healthier than when they came in. But there's a percentage that the military could identify that need the help, that need a boot camp out, that need to go through a process to find out, do they have a moral injury issue? Do they have a substance use issue that hasn't been treated? Do they need a harder connection to a job? Do they need to get to some kind of connection to employment or to entrepreneurial and I ran the TAP program in the Army 10 years ago, and I used to say, and Congress was doing all kinds of good stuff in my role, but it was one size fits none. It wasn't for all the good reasons, but what we found is we need individual look to see what's, with all the information they have, what is the risk assessment? And then those that are in the greatest need maybe need to take them out of the operational force, because that's what the problem is. The operational commander says, I don't have time to send you here or there because I got to keep you in the ready force. So we got to take you out of the operational force and put you in this boot camp out for the small amount of people that really need the help, so that we give you the soft landing on the other side. And so we talk about that in our report, so that you get them the help, because you've got this weird process of 200,000 in, 200,000 out of Department of Defense every year. And so if you're going to do that, you have to have a process that really takes care of those people coming in and out.
So General, my experience, I haven't been at this for like 12, 13 years now. There is genuine bipartisan interest in the transition. That's where we actually can talk to each other. So I'm going to kind of give you another little slice of this from the congressional jurisdiction point of view. Now I realize DOD has all the data, they have all the knowledge, but here's my experience. I've spoken to Chairman Bost about this, and he agrees with me that maybe the Veterans Affairs Committee so I'm talking about the committee. I'm not talking about which department, like whether it's Labor, DOD, or Veterans Affairs Department. It just seems to me that transition is not the highest priority of the Armed Services Committees in either house. Who really cares about it is the Veterans Affairs Committee, and we get real bipartisan dialogue over this. But we have trouble with jurisdiction because we've trying to get them to show up I'm trying to get DOD to show up to a meeting, a hearing that we hold. That's a real challenge, and I don't know how to. So Chairman Bost and I have talked about, should we try to take the jurisdiction on transition and make the laws and the policies, but then if it involves DOD budget, there's going to be like this conflict, right?
Well, and what the commission looked at, and it was a sticking point. We had two former secretaries of defense who both said in our deliberation, when you wait until they have already transitioned to start solving the problem of transition, it's too late.
Yeah.
We have to solve it while you do the risk assessment and the work while they're still on active duty. That's what
I can tell you, if what it meant to become a member of Armed Services is that people knew that in transitioning out, there was a clear pathway to go over to LA County, and there was a coordination with Jim Zenner's county folks.
Sure.
That he had people lined up competing to hire you. I mean, and then all these services were all kind of there. that you get justice involved. While we have all these ways to prevent you from getting into the justice system, but once you're there, you know, if people understood that this is what it meant to be a member of armed services, it would become even a more attractive place for people to decide they wanted to go.
And I think if they read the report, they'd see that the evidence is there to show that if you do it, you improve readiness. You improve readiness if you take care of the force while they're still on active duty. You improve readiness, you improve recruiting, you improve retention. You have a force that wants to serve.
Go ahead.
Is anyone working, is there a risk assessment model that's been established?
The TAP program has a program, but it's not the comprehensive program that requires what we recommended in the report, sir.
Well, it might be good for you to get that report so you can look at it. We'll get that report to all of our colleagues so they understand what a resource you are, having been the leader of the transition before. And, you know, it's one of the greater, so I want to stop talking because we're almost at time and I want to get more people who want to comment. Rose Carmen Goldberg.
Thank you. I wanted to circle back to your question about the tragedies of mass shootings and other atrocities committed by veterans. One lost opportunity there in terms of prevention is many of these individuals may have committed minor offenses previously and not have received the needed assistance and support for that. Veterans treatment courts have come up, diversionary courts. They're very powerful. They're proven to be very effective. And one would think that, you know, hopefully these veterans would be able to benefit from that type of treatment and wraparound services in the event that there are some minor infractions to prevent things escalating to these tragedies. Unfortunately, I do think the Veterans Treatment Court model is not being utilized to its maximum potential. There are a great amount of variety in terms of eligibility criteria, and unfortunately, it can be quite limited in some jurisdictions. There are some jurisdictions that require an honorable discharge status, which in my mind really gets things backward. It is veterans with bad paper discharges who are at that higher risk of committing crimes and being incarcerated. There also are some veteran treatment courts that limit services to combat veterans, locking out MST survivors and others who really could benefit from the program. There are some veterans treatment courts that have very onerous nexus requirements. You have to somehow find a qualified psychologist or psychiatrist to show a nexus between your crime and a service-connected condition. So I think loosening up and opening the doors to these really powerful treatment models can go a long way in terms of preventing these higher crimes. And to toot the horn of the Yale Law Veterans Legal Services Clinic students in Connecticut, they advocated for and got through legislation to expand diversion opportunities for veterans. One change is veterans are permitted to go through the program twice instead of once, recognizing that you might not be able to get all the needed treatment in one go, and also removing the requirement for a formal PTSD diagnosis, which can be hard to obtain and can be stigmatizing for some individuals.
Just before we move on, Rose, have there been a study of the mass shootings involving veterans and looking at commonalities or any kind of patterns that we can discern that would lead to us to looking at prevention?
I am not aware of that study, but I hope that study is authored so that we can think about prevention and solutions. I'm not sure if other panelists are aware of it.
I'm just wondering if there's been any work done on that. But okay. Mo?
Just back to your question about this causality of criminality in the veteran community, I just wanted to share from anecdotally our experience working in prisons in Northern California, and the staff at Swords to Plowshares runs the Veterans Pod in the local San Bruno jail, which houses offenders from San Francisco County, and all the jail mail we get every week in the legal unit at Swords from veterans all across the country, that this pathway of military service to experiencing trauma, whether that's combat, MST, to mental health struggles, to criminality, or as Dana mentioned, mental health struggles to a less than honorable discharge, to being denied resources and care when they separate from the service, to criminality, is a common fact pattern that we see in our clients. And I also just wanted to say that, to sort of validate that instinct that, that is what's going on, and to, your point about, we caused this problem, right? We harmed them, and we have a responsibility to heal them and to take care of them. And just again, to my point that the VA could be doing more to dedicate programming and funding to helping these folks while they're still incarcerated by giving them that claims assistance, because all the issues that we've talked about today between erroneous severance, overpayments, apportionment claims processes, getting them service connected so they have those basic needs met, all of these things could be well navigated by having somebody in the prisons and in the jails helping them navigate that claims process and having VBA employees in there. And there's precedent. The VA has a healthcare program for reentry from prison to the outside. So they do have a system where they have their staff going into these facilities to help with some of that transition in terms of healthcare. And it's just, again, there's a dearth of claims assistance, but getting folks set up with monetary financial stability while they're in prison and when they're getting out can help with a myriad of other legal and social and other issues and barriers to stability. So just as a pitch for a solution that setting up a program and a funding for more resources in this area for incarcerated folks, I think would help with a lot of the things we've talked about today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mo. I'm going to call on Raleigh Smith Duttweiler and then have General McEwen have the last word. So go ahead.
Picking up exactly where you are, the VA is the best solution for all of us. I mean, it's like at the heart of everybody's needs. If the VA helped here, if the VA did this, TAP is necessarily limited, and I understand that. I actually sat through a TAP program at Camp Lejeune with a baby on my hip trying to take notes because my husband's unit could not spare him for the day. So I was the one there taking notes, and I probably got more out of it than anybody else there because I wasn't worried about doing the checkout process. I wasn't thinking about all the things we needed to do in the next 72 hours before we completely relocated our lives. And that's where TAP is limited in what it can do in that brief period of time, but it's also the people sitting there through it are limited by what they can actually absorb in any usable manner. But when we drop back into community, unless we're dropping back into Jim's community, good luck to the rest of us, because we don't have that peer support network. I mean, I've told you many times, if we could copy and paste that around the country, I think we'd solve so many problems, but the VA could be that. The VA has the power to have some receiving TAP program. We should not leave and then just show up in community and hope for the best. What is it? We're Washington's quote, we return as a citizen, right? Like the whole family comes back and we do it without any place to hold us. The VA is the best kept program that's the best secret with the worst reputation. Because when I think about the ways that a family can get into VA, here are the paths I have. I can walk in the front door and say I don't have an appointment, I'm not a veteran, I'm not going any further than the front door. I can say I desperately need marriage counseling. It's me, I'm not worried about you, you're fine. I swear there's nothing I'm secretly concerned about. I just want to communicate better in our marriage. In Cleveland, at least, there were 4 therapists doing marriage counseling. We're now down to 1. She's part-time. There's a 6-month wait list. Good luck finding culturally competent marriage counseling to talk about the issues in your home that are 100% combat service related. I can do the intimate partner violence program, which I have done, and quite frankly, I'm pretty confident it saved my life. So thank you to the VA for that amazing program. But those are all crisis points. I don't have a path in before crisis. And when you look at all of the data, I mean, this is VA has a very bad rap and the suicide problem remains large, but we kept our suicide rate steady in the veteran community while the rest of America saw this massive increase. If there's no better proof that we're doing something right, it's that we didn't see that massive increase. We kept it steady, and veterans are more likely to come through the crisis still alive if they're getting care at the VA. The best way I can get all of the veterans I know care at the VA is to tell their moms, their girlfriends, their significant others, and their kids that this is the best place for them. And if there were some program that helped us come into the VA that welcomed us back into our communities as we transition out of the military alongside our service member, we'd go. We are really good at showing up for the mandatory fun events that we've been told to do through all of active duty. Take that learned behavior. Tell us to show up within 30 days, and I guarantee you we will, and we'll drag the veteran in our lives along with us. And that's getting them upstream. It's getting them connected to the best possible care we possibly can, and it's such a wonderful opportunity. It's not just fixing the TAP program, it's figuring out how to bring us into VA once we are back in the communities where we hope to build the rest of our lives.
Wow, thank you so much for that. General, last word.
Sir, I'll promise you I'll be as short as a retired old general can be. Three quick points. First, Rose talked about VTCs, Veterans Treatment Courts. CCJ, Council on Criminal Justice, authored a model policy framework that complements VTCs, because we know there's about 600 VTCs in the country. Not all VTCs look alike, we know that. They only reach about 15% of the jurisdictions in the country, and not all veterans have access. We know that. So what we did is we came up with a model policy framework that was looked at by policy makers on both sides of the aisle, basically. And it basically gives judges the authority, a statutory authority, to act like a VTC. And so that's available. We'll send, if anybody wants a copy of it, we'll send it to you. Second is, the Senate has approved NDAA Section 915 that we hope goes through the HASC and the SAS and goes through the conference process to get a senior DOD official for transition, which is one of the policy recommendations that we made in our reports, because we think DOD needs to have that separate and distinct. It didn't go as far as we asked, but it's further than currently is on the books. The third thing is thank you. Thank you for your leadership and for illuminating all these problems, issues. When I was in the Army, I tell this to groups all the time. When I was in the Army and I wanted things to happen, I just say, do it. And so I thought when I took this job, we're going to do criminal justice reform. This is going to be easy. It's not easy. This is hard work. And it's incremental, and it's frustrating as heck. But we're making progress, and we've got these 1,000 flowers blooming. And I think today we're starting to see some bouquets. I think we're gonna make progress. And so I just want to thank you publicly for what you and the team here is doing, because this isn't a left or right issue. It's a right or wrong issue. This is about leadership, not about cheerleading. And so thank you for convening this.
Well, General, I appreciate that, and I take that, your kind words, but the thank you is, even doubly a return to all of you. You have dedicated your lives to an amazing mission. The very specialized knowledge that you have built is just remarkable. And I'm so thankful that wherever you find the funding, the wherewithal to do what you do, I'm impressed that we do these things in this country. I just can't imagine. I hear horror stories about what it's like to be in the Russian military. Serious families, they just fear about their family members having to go into the military. And I'm not saying ours is a bed of roses, but I think our citizenry, the care with which we try to hold our government accountable to do what's, as the General says, what's right. I just want to thank everyone here just for being here. And I know these conversations are very nuanced and difficult. And, as you know, it is usually in tackling the very difficult questions that we're able to do the most good for the most people. And while the times may be difficult, the work sometimes seems thankless, I feel really renewed strength and pride knowing that there are people like you who do this work on behalf of our veterans and their families. I also remain thankful that the veterans have people like you, and that people who that represent the best of who we are, people who reach out to those who are struggling and offer to help them right themselves. Now, just like we saw with the PACT Act, it will take all voices to advance efforts to address the hardships that these veterans and their families face. And I know we can tell the stories. I know we can gather the stories that will grab people's sense, the American people's sense of justice, their sense of what's right, and we can marshal this government to do amazing things. So after today's conversation, I'd be more confident that together we can do the hard work necessary to lift up all of those who need uplifting. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us today, for convening, and I wish you safe travels back to your communities, okay? Thank you.